I wanted to just kick off today's discussion with a brief discussion of a case called White versus Chevron. Let's go to the next page. This suit is just the latest in a series now running to about 24 ERISA class action lawsuits filed by the law firm of Schleicher, Bogard, and Denton. If anyone has a client that has received any kind of correspondence communication from Schleicher, Bogard, and Denton, this is serious. These guys have figured out, thanks to the Supreme Court decision in 2007 called LaRue, that for the first time in the history of ERISA, gave participants the right to sue as a class rather than on their own behalf, which had been the law until 2007. So Schleicher, Bogard has filled this vacuum. They have become what I call the 900-pound gorilla in ERISA plaintiffs' class actions. And seriously, anyone who has any correspondence for them really need to take that very seriously. They filed lawsuits, and fortunately, they're looking at plans with billions in assets. So, for now anyway, I think anyone who is client-facing and has sponsors with less than $1 billion in assets, I think for now at least, they're safe. But I think what's significant, and this is why I wanted to cover this case, is that the Schleicher legal actions really provide an excellent roadmap for committees, planned committees, to see exactly the soft spots in the armor of organizations that actually think they've had well-run, very prudently run plans, and Schleicher has a real knack for getting at what are real vulnerable points, all related to allegations of excess of fees. In 2015, just about 11 months ago, at the end of the 2015 term, the Supreme Court issued a unanimous opinion that never before happened in an ERISA case in this landmark decision called Tibble versus Edison, which I know we discussed last year. And essentially what the Schleicher law firm got the Supreme Court to agree to unanimously is that committees really have a duty, and they spelled this out, an ongoing duty to monitor the performance of investment funds, and in particular, in the Tibble case, they expressed some displeasure with the committee's failure to adopt so-called institutional share classes, and they specifically mentioned that, as opposed to retail or investor share classes, which is really at the heart of this White versus Chevron suit, as we'll see in a second. I just wanted to mention one other thing, in case you didn't see it. Last Monday, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, a story reads, and it's right in the middle of the first page: fees on 401k plans head lower. And this was a very interesting article. I think for lay people, a real good kind of handy reference to what's going on. This is the revolution that we've been speaking about for 3.5 years now, and specifically the Schleicher law firm was mentioned in the second page of the article as having a major responsibility in helping lower fees and expenses across the country. So, let's go to the next page. The White versus Chevron suit is a frontal attack, and this is what I think this is a frontal attack on Vanguard. Now, for those of you who know, Vanguard and its founder John Bogle have made a religion out of two things: passive investing, index funds, on the ground that and this. I think they're actually helping prove the theory now 40 years in the making, that index funds generally beat the market. That is, beat the market of actively managed plans. And the main reason they do that is that they charge lower fees. Okay, and so Vanguard made a religion out of being the low cost provider in terms of expense ratios in its funds. Here's the skinny on this lawsuit. Two major actions against Vanguard. Number one, the allegation is that this plan, which had $19 billion as of the 17th of February 2016, was imprudently managed on two fundamental grounds. Number one, the plan had, and we'll see this in the table we're going to go to in a second, billions in a so-called money market fund. And the allegation is that this fund produced nothing, 0.002% return, and had an expense ratio that's much larger than a stable value fund alternative available in the brokerage window account at Vanguard. I thought this was actually very interesting. I'm personally a big proponent of Vanguard. I'm not paid to say this, but I think their theories are proving to be sound. I was unaware of this stable value alternative. The second, and this is really just the second allegation, and this really comes from the Supreme Court decision that Vanguard, or that the Schleicher firm helped win. The allegation is that Vanguard, the low-cost provider, provided funds which had a considerably higher cost ratio because they were so-called investor shares, that is retail share classes, and not the institutional, much lower cost share classes. Let's go to the next page.
John, I wonder, before we go to the next page, so most of us out here think that, well, Vanguard is, I mean, we don't need to do any due diligence
right,
on
we're
it
done.
because it's passive, it's cheap as you can get it, and so nothing needed. So this case is saying, oh, yeah, you still need to look.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I think makes this. There are several aspects which I'm going to go into. Thank you, Don. Which I'm trying to just mention up front. Yeah, you might have thought, if you have some background experience in the retirement industry, that Vanguard, low cost provider, index funds, you're all set. You don't need to worry about a thing. This lawsuit says, hold on, hold everything. Yes, there are issues even with Vanguard, and the two big ones, as I mentioned a minute ago, are a frontal attack on this money market fund, and the allegation is that it provided next to nothing, and that's not a surprise to everyone who has studied money markets, and Don's going to talk about those funds in a minute, have produced nothing for years now, and in fact, after you take out the fund from the fund, the expense to run it, in fact, there's a negative return. So stable value funds considered a much better alternative, and looking at it, it clearly, they've got a real good point. And the second aspect is, and this cannot be stressed enough, even with Vanguard, their retail fund, retail share classes, which they call investor, are expensive when compared with institutional share classes. So this is the lineup. From the top down, you can see what this investment committee thought appropriate for this large Chevron plan, including almost $9 million in Chevron common stock, and you get down to the fourth from the bottom. There were just about every imaginable target date retirement fund, beginning with 2015 through 2060. I just condensed that and called it the target date retirement trust, with almost $800 million in assets. So this is a plan that we'd all recognize as having tremendous clout and leverage and marketplace presence. to, and this is really the fundamental part of Schleicher's allegation, and I think there's an awful lot of truth to this, as we all know. This is a plan based on its size, has market clout to extract the lowest possible fund expenses, fees, etc. Next page. Okay. This is a summary of the second allegation, essentially showing Vanguard funds, and you can see on the left column, starting with, for example, the institutional index. The plan's cost remains 5 basis points. That certainly sounds pretty low to me. I mean, you can see right down the list, 7 basis points for the total bond fund. We'll talk about the prime cap in a second. You know, the total stock market index, 5 bips, right down the line to the extended market, 8 bips. Not good enough. That's the message. You look over on the right, the second from the right-hand column, you'll see what also available as a Vanguard investor in the so-called institutional share classes. Instead of 5 basis points for the institutional index, for example, it's a 2.5 basis point charge. Save, I mean, you calculate this in one of 2 ways, but my calculation, it's a 50% reduction from the 5 to the 2.5. If you look at the bigger numbers, the prime money market, which is focused all by itself of one of the counts here in the complaint, paying 23 basis points, getting about 3 or 4 basis points in return, and available even a lower cost institutional share class at 9 basis points, still leading to a negative return, but shrinking the expense by 156%. Right down the line. I mean, you can see, for example, look at the total stock market index, 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom, paying 5, available at 2.5, savings of 50%. You add up all these numbers, in each of the funds in the plan, you get to a large sum of alleged excess back in fees and expenses paid by the plan. Okay, let's go to the next page.
You know, to me, Jonathan, before you go to this page, I just I look at the prime money market Vanguard, and you know, just the word prime kind of puts you to sleep, and yet they were taking 23 basis points.
Yeah. Sure.
You really have to look under the covers. You can't even assume a money market is going to be fair. Everything must be
detailed, professional analysis. That's the point. This is a plan that has $19 billion in assets, and you can see, and you all know from your personal experience, that has clout. And even so, this very well-funded company with lots of staff on board missed the boat on this money market with essentially, as I said, 3 basis points in return, costing 23 basis points. Hello, shouldn't that have been a real red warning flag before the Schleicher firm walked in and closed the company, closed its plan, and should have been on notice that they're clearly something amiss in Denmark on that and every other fund. So, table 3, just reading through the complaint, they mentioned the inception date for the funds listed here in table 3, on which the retail investor class funds were chosen, starting on these dates. So you can see for the prime money market, nearly 27 years ago. This selection has been in the fund lineup with 23 basis points. It was probably more. It was probably much more in 1989. Maybe a higher return too, but for nearly 27 years, this misjudgment has been a part of this story. And you can see all the other dates, and so you can see how far ago, how far you have to look back to see the beginnings of this huge problem. Okay, let's go to the next page. This is where it also gets interesting. As you might recall from Table 1, there are many selections here that are not Vanguard funds. So now, you know, the logic of the lawsuit is, okay, we've now made you look at just how ugly these Vanguard fund choices were. Okay, now we're going to look at these non-Vanguard funds because we know that, you know, everybody understands they're the low-cost provider. Okay, but we see even with their own funds that they're not necessarily the ones picked by committees. So here you now have a look at the non-Vanguard funds with a comparison on the expense ratios actually applied on this page for these non-Vanguard funds against what they would have been in Vanguard. So you have the Artisan small cap, 122 basis points. Okay, 122 basis points. The Vanguard Explorer in the institutional share class would be 9 bips, save 107%. If they had gone to something that looked similar to the Artisan small cap at a much lower share class fund at Vanguard, the small cap value index fund at 8 basis points, I calculate it would have savings of 1,425%, and a fairly significant amount invested in that fund. You look at the Artisan mid cap, also at 122 pips. Just look at this thing. How did this happen? Looking at the Vanguard mid cap in comparison at 54 pips, 126% saved, and looking even more attractive is the Vanguard mid cap growth index fund at 10 basis points against 122, a savings I calculate of 1,120%. Staggering numbers. You know, I've read through this complaint, mouth kind of agape at just really how much detail people need to pay attention to. This is the message. This is what I really want to leave message with people. The one good thing that the Schleichter law firm is doing is not just for the participants in the plans and extracting settlements left and right, but they are providing us a really good, solid roadmap on how we need to think about the client plans that we all interact with. Okay, let's go to the next page. This is the last table I wanted to look at. So, what did the Schleichter law firm do aside from really make us look at Vanguard in a different way? Institutional share classes instead of the let's go back, instead of the investor share classes, the retail shares, looking at the cost of Vanguard funds in comparison with the funds they actually had. There are two other allegations I just wanted to cover very quickly before we move on. The focus here is on separate accounts. There was another account on collective trust investments, and this is just a quick summary of investments in the lineup, where you can see there was a mutual fund selection, and what the Schleicher people did was look at separate accounts with the same exact investment, the same exact advisors. Uh, and you can see, looking at the artisan small cap value, for example, we've already looked at this previous slide, 22 bips compared to the much lower cost uh, Vanguard Small Cap Value Index. But even looking at something that may be unique in terms of the market clout of this particular plan and plans like it, but may not be available, to the more regular Main Street plans that we deal with. There really was an alternative to look at a separate account and save a lot, as you can see in that middle column for each of these funds. I just wanted to end very quickly and say there was a similar allegation regarding collective trust funds, where and I don't know if this is true. I haven't really tested. I don't know if anybody out there has, but the Schleicher people did some homework, and they concluded that again, the same investments chosen in the form of a mutual fund could have been made in the form of a collective trust fund managed by the very same people who are managing the mutual funds, because money's money, and having assets is more revenue, and there would have been a significant savings realized from that. I've reached the end of my brief presentation. Don, one turn over to you. I'm sorry I'm going to miss this discussion on the economically targeted investments. But until next time we meet in 2 weeks, bye for now.
Yes, thank you. Gang, I think we can take a number of approaches to this. Some people will say, well, these are billion-dollar plans. They're not going to affect million-dollar plans. And maybe that's so. That's a possibility. Some are going to say it doesn't matter. The participant is still important. I think fiduciary governance is not about the fear of a lawsuit. I think it's not about the fear of the DOL or the IRS. I think it's about the concern for the participants, regardless if the DOL ever shows up, regardless if the IRS ever shows up, regardless if there's ever a lawsuit. That we cannot escape. And fiduciary governance is about the conscience to the most weak in any situation, which in this case is the participant and their beneficiaries. And so I cringe a little bit when we look at these cases, and and I'm just talking personally, and a thought is said, well, these are billion-dollar plans, because it still is precious money. In fact, I would argue, using the biblical expression of the widow's mite, I would argue that the widow's mite is more precious than the individual who has thousands of dollars in their account. So fiduciary care is about that sacred responsibility of bringing in independent professionals who will look after those that are weak and vulnerable. So when I look at this, I have to tell you that I'm over 40 years into this business. And the fact is that it looks to me like I can't even take a Vanguard money market and let's see, where is it? Right here. And say that's good enough. I must, for the sake of that participant, even though the plan I'm looking at doesn't have nearly $1 billion in money market, but nevertheless, it is that individual participant's money, and it is sacred and needs to be looked that way. And so I applaud what Schleicher is doing. I really do. And as an industry, I talked this morning to a very interesting group who, when I was at the NIPA conference, and others of you, had a booth, and they called me, and in fact they emailed me, and they said, how can we be a partnership? That's the way they worded it. And so they wanted to talk with me and use the word partnership. And they have a particular niche in the market that they're wanting to go after the purity of the ERISA market, and which leads into a discussion that we're going to have right now. Dick Billings, are you on the phone right now? Can you hear me?
Hey, Don. Michael Billings is on. This is me.
Yeah, Dick's on too, but Dick was on mute, so I'm here now.
Okay, fine. I would like you to take a moment and talk about how you're doing two things, and I so appreciate each of you, your willingness to share. For as fiduciary doctors gets more known and more important, each of you add to it, and it's important for your process as well. And Dick and Michael have been so willing to share ideas, and I'm so appreciative of it. A number of months ago, I don't remember now, 5, 6 months ago, we introduced the concept of having a regional ministerial agent, and that would be where we had a ministerial agent and they really fell in love with what we were doing and were in the process of perfecting it. And then at that point would have an opportunity to go out and become a regional ministerial agent and then bring other ministerial agents under them. And the more we have thought about it, the more we're convinced that the best way to grow this business is from the ministerial agents who get it, understand it, have the experience in it, and then go out to other TPA firms and spread the good news and shepherd them into coming under them with the label of fiduciary doctors. Dick and Michael, I'd like to ask you, I'd like to state the 3 or 4 questions and then ask you to spend some time on it. Why are you, let me ask the 4 questions first. Why are you thinking so seriously about being a regional ministerial agent? And what are you saying to other potential ministerial agents? What have you learned so far? And I know you've just started doing it. And what are your goals as it relates to being a regional ministerial agent? So with those 4 questions in mind, can I turn it to Michael to
Yes, this is Dick, and I'll speak, and then Michael will tell me where I'm wrong. And for those of you who don't know, we're in Sioux City, Iowa, so we're in a very small population, 100,000. Michael's my older son. My younger son Matthew's also in the business, and we have about 20 employees, and we administer plans in 32 states with about just under 600 plans. But back to Don's first question, why are we doing this? Everything points to a fiduciary training. Now, you can define that in different ways, whether that's lawsuits or educational training, but I think no one would disagree that it's a fiduciary train. And you're either going to be on the train or you're not on the train. And there are clients of mine who say, I'm not concerned about these fiduciary risks. I'm not concerned about lawsuits, so they're not going to be clients for us today. But we have a lot of clients who are concerned about that. And every TPA I talk to wants to be on the fiduciary train in a general sense, and the question is simply how. And the way fiduciary doctors are structured, which is so attractive to other TPAs, is that it's a low capital investment. I was going to do it myself. I was going to set up my own little company, separate company, which I did do that. That was pretty simple. But set up the whole structure to do that. Working with fiduciary doctors as an expert 316 allows the TPA, through an original MA or not, to be able to offer the service, make extra money, and to be part of the fiduciary train. Now, so the goal is that if we look at the Schlichter experience, the 408B2 and 404A5 regs of 2012, and there's more in the pipeline from the Department of Labor now, let's go out 10 years. It's only going to be more of an issue that plan sponsors are looking at their plans professionally. And I don't know if any of you have seen this. This came out in the NAPA email, I think, earlier this week. Don't quote me on that, but there's an article there from Neville Adams. And there's a court case called Domberg versus Lamettings, I think it is. It's a auto repair place. It's a retirement plan up in Minnesota. It has $9 million worth of assets and 114 participants, and it is being sued for excessive fees. It's a Voya case. And that case is structured like every other Voya case that exists, and if you take any of the other vendors, they're all the same. So that's a $10 million plan that's being sued by a firm out of Minneapolis. So, and then, like one other comment, we actually have a client, and we do their daily record keeping in the TPA work, but they're an old profit sharing plan that turned into a 401k, and they have these old investments. And I don't mean old in the sense of they've had them for 50 years, but we're going to manage that. That's our money. Well, they were investigated by the Department of Labor last year, and they had to write a check to the plan for $37,000 because of an improper investment. And previously, they never let us talk to them about restructuring that investment portfolio. So just think how many plans are out there that are just like the Voya case that I mentioned that's being sued, and just like our client who has these old partnerships and old pieces of land or whatever else that they're investing in that they simply had forever and have done almost no due diligence as to whether it's proper to hold. Michael, anything?
No, I think you explained it pretty well. And my only input is, and Don's kind of preached this before too, is, in our line of work, I think we're kind of becoming a commodity in the marketplace, and we need to differentiate ourselves to show that value-added advice. And I'll just give you an example of something. We have 2 Twitter accounts that we use. One's a Billings and Company account, and one's a Fiduciary Doctors of the Midwest account. And I've always had a hard time trying to come up with topics to tweet about on the Billings and Company side. But with the Fiduciary Doctors of the Midwest side, it's very simple because it's such a hot topic in the industry. And we happened to be tweeting last week, and we had a guy out in California, and we got a proposal for a $6 million plan just from talking about fiduciary topics from tweets. So that's something that we're excited about, is adding that value-added service, being different in the marketplace, and then finding that traction out there.
I have right in front of me on my desk, it was sent to me this morning by Earl Garvin, and it is this Domberg-Severson case. And it is a $9 million plan. And we have continued to believe that it could come down source to the $1 million plans, and now here, to my knowledge, is the first one. And it's a 40-page brief, and exactly 40 pages. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's the same old. And who they're suing is the plan sponsor, and the CFO, and the CEO, and the committee, and the trustees. And so what's it about? It's a copycat of Tibble or Tussey or Chevron, which is about retail fees and record keepers getting paid too much, etc. So So how do you, and I know you're just starting with it, but so give us an example of what you would say to another TPA, because normally you all would be, quote, competitors. So how are you starting that conversation?
Well, this is Dick, and I'm going to show my age a little bit, but there's a classic line in the old Dirty Harry movie called Magnum Force, and you can get this on YouTube. It's only 11 seconds long. But Clint Eastwood says, a man's got to know his limitations. We are all busy people, and if most of us that are TPAs, I mean that run TPA firms, are entrepreneurs, like myself, and myself included, tend to have a very poor self-structure. So if, as I said earlier, every TPA wants to be on the fiduciary train, in a general sense, the question is, how do I do it? And I don't have time to do it myself. I can't afford to do it myself. I don't know how to start, and so forth. And so the idea simply is, with fiduciary doctors and then with the RMA process that we've established, is I'm not going to do it for them. I mean, it's no different than anything else. I can't fix your car. I can fix your car, but you need to run your car properly and maintain it and so forth. And so we're going to come in and show them the structure, because the templates are there, the structure's there. They just need to commit a small upfront financial contribution, and they need to commit at least one person, preferably more, in terms of simply dripping on their clients, just like we have done since coming on with fiduciary doctors. You simply drip on the clients, and they will come forth, because they are looking for that, and they're reading some of the same things that we just talked about in terms of $10 million plans being sued. These CFOs and CEOs are reading that stuff, and so when they see an alternative, it's not a very difficult sell.
Dick and Michael, so are you, like when you go to a conference, are you looking for people to talk to, or are you just more passive about it?
Probably
this is Michael.
Go ahead, Michael.
This is Michael. Yeah, I just attended a Charles Schwab conference in Denver this last week, and you know, and a lot of times at these conferences, you get the opportunity to have a conversation sitting next to someone for breakfast or lunch, etc. So I sat with some people, and I just started the dialogue of what are they doing.
And you didn't know them.
I did not know them.
Okay.
And
you sat at a table, you didn't know them.
Didn't know them, and just asked them, you know, is there anything that you guys are putting in place for, you know, to provide the 316 option for your clients? And then I usually get a comment, no, we're not doing anything. Yes, you know, we're exploring it, or you know, yes, I'd like to find out more information. Or I get the comment of, yeah, well, what do you do? And then that kind of leads into a good conversation about, you know, what we firmly have developed in place. But I mean, I talked to 3 competitors, and they're interested in basically learning more about the process and how it works.
Yeah. So just by bringing it up, it's a hot topic, and if you can just add water, if you will, and the plant's going to grow, it's you know, it's what they're looking for. What, maybe you haven't got this far, but I mean, what's your goals? How many ministerial agents would you like to have under you, realistically, and you be the regional ministerial agent, receiving 20% of the compensation? Have you thought that far?
Yes, Dick's goal is to have 5 MAs by the end of this year.
Your goal is to have 5 MAs by the end of this year, and knowing you, Dick, you guys will do that. Now, spend another moment with us. I hope everyone's enjoying this as much as I am. Tell me, you all just went out and hired a full-time individual, Trey, to which Tom Bick is working with, our Vice President of Channel Development. And so you've hired a full-time person to go out and preach about fiduciary doctors. Tell us a little bit about that. Why you decided to do it? Why you put that kind of money into it? What do you hope to accomplish?
Well, this is Dick, and we hired Trey because it's Michael and I primarily, and then we also have another sales assistant named Brandon who are out actually pitching it and opening the door. Trey's job is to do the follow-up work, the contractual details, setting up the meetings. He's called our operations coordinator because, especially speaking for myself, I'm great at opening up prospects, but I'm lousy at doing the proper follow-up. So that's what Trey does.
And tell us about his experience. What has he done? I mean, I know that, but I want you to tell them. What's his background?
His background, he was a principal for... Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I think Trey, are you on the phone? Maybe you want to talk real quick? No? Okay, go ahead, Dick.
Trey was with principal for 22 years, and what his job was as a relationship manager with the plan sponsors directly in helping, these are bundled systems, by the way, in helping the plan sponsors understand the services that principal provided. So he has a lot of relationship experience with retirement plans, and we were just fortunate to find him because he knows 316 in the general sense. He obviously knows retirement plans on a very specific level. And when I started opening this position up, I thought we were not going to be able to find somebody who really had a lot of risk experience, but he does.
Good. Well, I thank you for sharing time with us today and being so generous in talking to us about this. Thank you very much. You guys are just excellent partners for us. Let's change gears here now, and because I want to make sure that we spend a few minutes to talk about economically targeted investments. We think of them as socially responsible funds. The Department of Labor came out with a bulletin, interpretive bulletin 2015-01. And you're going to see in a moment that it replaces interpretive bulletin 2008-01. So 7 years later, they have replaced it. And I want to just quickly go through it, not so much about socially responsible, but what they say about it. So they go into the fact that anytime that you're going to talk about investments, you are talking about a fiduciary process that committees should follow. Now, you all have hundreds of hundreds of plan sponsors out there. Are they meeting with the committee? Do they even have a PAC meeting? And is it your responsibility to let them know they should have it? I believe that most sales occur just by letting people become aware of an alternative and their responsibility. But they start off by saying, we're going to be talking about a fiduciary process here that a committee should follow in evaluating their ETIs versus other investment alternatives. So, okay, let's carry it on a little bit. So then they say, ETIs are not inherently suspect and do not have to be subject to a special scrutiny. But they go on to say that the committee should take care to account for primary factors in selecting these alternative investments. And by the way, at first you think alternative means these ETIs, but they mean any investments, such as expected investment returns. Now, you often hear the financial industry saying, well, the return doesn't matter. It's, what happened yesterday isn't conclusive of what will happen tomorrow. But clearly the Department of Labor says, oh yes, it does matter. And then they go on to say that the committee needs to observe a prudent process. in going over these funds, and the committee should be comfortable with what they're going to provide in the core funds. If not, perhaps do it in a brokerage window. So Bolton goes on to say that they're clear that whether you're talking about an ETI or other, ERISA does not permit fiduciaries to sacrifice economic interest of the participants. Now stop there for a moment, because when I first read it, I kept thinking, well, it's about ETIs. But they're saying no. Now remember, Jonathan just went over the Chevron case. And that could have been put in there. ERISA does not permit fiduciaries to sacrifice economic interest of the participants. What that says to me is like, warning, do not trespass on our money. I think every plan should have, like, if you came to property, it says, warning, do not trespass. Every retirement plan should say, warning by the participant, this is our money, do not sacrifice it for your particular interest. Then they go on to talk about that they're withdrawing both in 2008-01 because it unduly was discouraging fiduciaries from considering ETIs. And now they're just saying, look, you need to look at an ETI as no different than any other investment. So now, here to me is the key. So, okay, let's get behind us that ETIs should be looked at no different than any other investment or socially responsible. Got it. But now they're going to go into, well, so how do you look at them? And they're going to give us a quick 6 items to see if you've done your due diligence. 1, you consider and compare and contrast whether it be an ETI or any other investment in its peer group. I had just yesterday an investment professional say, oh, this fund is down, this fund isn't rated well because that particular peer group isn't doing well, to which I didn't want to embarrass him, but that is not the answer. So I quietly, politely said, well, no, this matrix is judging against peers in the same group, whether they're down or not. And this fund among its peers hasn't done well. And he looks at me like, oh, gee, you didn't know that, because he's looked at this periodic table for so many years. So Department of Labor said, point number 1 is you need to compare and contrast. Point number 2, in comparing and contrasting, you need to bring in all traditional matrices, expense ratio, past performance, quality of management, etc. In other words, you can't leave anything out. You must meet highest standards under 404. Point number 3, you must receive input, and notice the term here, from an independent investment advisor. Now, if you're not a fiduciary, you can't give input. I have an individual who's a wonderful person, and they have about a $10 million plan that means so much to them, but they have chosen not to be a fiduciary. And and she knows that the walls are, are about to gobble her, because her choice not to be a fiduciary is inhibiting that plan. And so here the Department of Labor says, well, in essence, they're saying, look, if you don't have if your investment professional isn't a fiduciary, you need to seek someone who is a fiduciary, such as fiduciary doctors, to evaluate and give alternatives. Point number 4, if you're going to select an ETI, it has to be superior. I think they could have easily said, if you're going to select anything, it has to be superior alternative. Point number 5, you must document, the committee must document the decision-making process in its minutes. Well, how do you have minutes? You have PAC meetings and retain these materials for your review process, including any input from who? The investment advisor. A plan today for each of you that are TPAs out there, that I know those brokers are important to you. Please hear this. I know they're important. But if they're not willing, and maybe for very good reasons, to be a fiduciary, then bringing in fiduciary doctors to oversee what it's doing is the best gift you can give to that plan. And then finally, here we go again, the investment, if it's not prudent, it shouldn't be expected to be in the lineup. So the areas I just wanted to cover is, it starts off by talking about ETIs, but then it switches and says, look, forget about 2008-01 interpretive bulletin. We're now saying any investment, ETI or any other, needs to go through these 6 processes. Compare, contrast, bring in traditional matrix, have a fiduciary advisor who can give advice because that plan sponsor doesn't know what to do, choose only superior investments, document the process, and don't choose a dog. And that's the last one, basically. I mean, if it's had a low return up till now, it's not going to get better because it's being judged in its own peer group. So that's a little bit about ETFs. So let's just move on here so we can get this in date. The new money market rules. Okay. Well, we've had plenty of time to look at it. So back in July 2014, almost 2 years ago, 24 months ago, the SEC adopted new rules designed really be fairer in interest rates, credit, and liquidity of money market funds. Now, we talked earlier about the Vanguard. I mean, really, would you think the day would come that you would look under the covers for a Vanguard fund in a $19 billion plan? Well, yes. And so, effective as of October 2016, so they gave 26 months, there will be new rules. What are these new rules? Basically, you have 3 types of money market funds. You have government money market funds, which in order to be classified as government, 99.5% of the assets are in cash or U.S. Department of Treasury securities. Okay? You have retail, which they define as there is an ownership of a natural person. That's a DC type plan, defined contribution type plan. And then you have institutional, which is really more of pooled accounts, more of a defined benefit type plan. Okay, now it's all about the volatility and the protection of the money market account. So let me go to it. Here's the rule. And I should have reversed these, so I'm going to go to the bottom one first. If the level of liquid assets, in other words, if there's a run on the plan, falls below 10% of what the total assets were, then the director or directors of the fund may respond by putting in up to a 1% redemption fee. In other words, a penalty for getting out. It could be less than 1%, but it can't be more than 1%. If the level of the liquid assets goes below 30%, then the directors can put up to a 2% redemption fee, can be less than 2, and they can even temporarily suspend redemptions, meaning, close the bank, up to 10 days, but only one time every 90 days. Now, the question is, what do you do about it? Well, if your plans, and what a perfect time for you to visit every plan. You can, if you wanted a way to go to every one of your plans, this is it. So if a plan, and most all of them are in the retail fund category, meaning it's owned by a natural person in a DC plan. So you could go to them and talk about, you're in a retail plan, what should you do now? And as I see it, you have three possibilities. You can do nothing, just wait and see, okay? Or you could also do nothing by saying, well, we're not even going to worry about it because the chances of it happening aren't too great. Or you can take a safe approach, and that's what we're suggesting plans do, and let me go back to this, that they go into a governmental money market fund, government fund, I'm sorry, a governmental fund, because they're under the changes that are occurring as of October 2016, there is no redemption fees on them. And there is no temporary suspension of taking your money out. Or something else. But you, as the third-party administrator, are you seeing the financial advisors even talking about that money market account? In a few cases, yes, but in most cases, no. And so we just wanted you to be aware of the changes in the money market accounts, the changes in ETIs, and how that points to, in my humble opinion, and I really believe this, I don't believe there's a TPA out there that can no longer not get into the fiduciary side, the Title I side of ERISA. They just can't afford not to do it. Or they're not going to be able to stay competitive. And I'm going to say what I've said before, it's the top of the hour. I sincerely believe, every client that you have and every client that your competitors have need to know that this is a Title I world now. And it started in 2008 and has gone, well, no, Pension Protection Act of 2006, and has gone forward from there. Now, whether that means you do it as a TPA, as a ministerial agent, or whether whoever thought you'd think about it, or whether you bring other TPAs under your wing. Remember, as a regional, you get 20% of the revenue. They get 40%, we get 40%. And we're never again going to give 60% to a ministerial agent. So you have an opportunity not just to have your own shop, but to spread that to other shops. So we appreciate being with you today. We appreciate you. Any final comments before we say goodbye for the day? And we hope you have a very safe Memorial Day. Thank you. It's good to be with you. We'll sign off for now, and we'll pick up again in 2 more weeks. Talk to you later. Thank you so much.